This video, one of our 2022 Symposium videos, is entitled From Toll Road to Highway, The History of Colorado Highway 74, presented by Mark Joyce. It covers the history of the Bear Creek Wagon Trail from its beginnings in 1872 as a treacherous road flooded annually to toll road that provided stagecoach trips from Morrison to Evergreen and points beyond. It was converted to a formal Colorado highway in 1912. Bear Creek served as the gateways to the foothills through Bear Creek Canyon as envisioned by its founder George Morrison, and then as the gateway to the Denver Mountain Parks. Mark Joyce is a member of the Evergreen Mountain Area Historical Society and its current treasurer. He is also a member of History Colorado, History Jeffco, and the Colorado Geological Survey. He and his wife are busy rebuilding a 1933 cabin overlooking Bear Creek. In the mid-1800s, growth in the Evergreen area was driven by ranching, mining, and the abundance of wood and sawmills in the area. Most of the lumber had to be hauled up to Idaho Springs for mining or down to Denver for building. Like today, having reliable transportation was key to the area's development. A primitive road existed through Bear Creek Canyon between Morrison and Evergreen, following a route originally established by the native tribes in the area, as shown on this map. Upgrading the route to accommodate newer modes of transportation proved a challenging task. There was no systematic effort to develop a reliable roadway until 1874. The road that was developed has become, over the decades, Colorado State Highway 74. The highway follows basically the original route, with improvements made over time to build it high enough above the water line of Bear Creek to avoid washouts and to eliminate sharp and blind corners. Surprisingly, the development of the road was spurred by a planned railroad through the canyon. Railways were all the rage in the 1870s. In 1872, the Denver South Park and Pacific Railway filed plans to develop a railroad out of Denver to Morrison, up Bear Creek to Evergreen, and then on to Como and the mining camps beyond. However, the route through Bear Creek Canyon was daunting. The canyon was notorious for floods, and the walls were sheer in places. The railroad engineers considered alternative routes. Finally, in December 1873, the railroad made the decision to run the train through the South Platte Canyon. The town of Morrison was destined to become a spur line, a secondary line branching off from the main line. Laying of the rails began in Denver in April 1874, and the 18 miles of line from Denver to Morrison was completed 3 months later. The railway was no longer headed up the canyon, yet the towns of Morrison and Evergreen still required a reliable transportation method through the canyon. To address this issue, the same year, George Morrison and a group of local business people formed a company to build and maintain a toll road through the canyon. 2 years before, the same George Morrison had founded the Morrison Stone, Lime, and Town Company, along with former Governor John Evans and others, to plat the area that became the town of Morrison. The town of Morrison became a critical link for supplies to Bear Creek ranches and a shipping point for Evergreen area lumber. Toll roads were not new to Colorado. A decade earlier, the Colorado Territorial Legislative Assembly created a method for private companies to build toll roads. All that was needed was an incorporated business to apply with all relevant required information to the county where the road was to be built. Once approved, the county provided the company with right-of-way and the authority to collect tolls for a period of time contingent on performance. Many of the roads in Colorado are the result of toll roads constructed under this act. In 1874, the Bear Creek Wagon Road Company was formed. The founding document stated, "The object of said company is to build a wagon road from the town of Morrison in Jefferson County, Colorado Territory to Hicks Mill in the same county along or near Bear Creek." Hicks Mill was the first commercial sawmill in Clear Creek County and was established by Dan Hicks and family in the late 1860s. A ditch brought Bear Creek water to the mill close to the Bendemeer buildings near Troutdale. This property is now located near the Singing River Ranch on Upper Bear Creek. Bear Creek Canyon presented an exceptional challenge to the road builders. The road was originally financed for $25,000, about $850,000 in today's dollars, as noted in the incorporation documents. Whether underfinanced or mismanaged, by the end of 1875, in its annual statement, the corporation reported that almost 80% of the funds allocated were either spent or obligated, as reported in the Golden Weekly Globe on October 23rd of 1875. "Altogether, the officers of this road are in a swamp of trouble, from which we sincerely trust they may be enabled to speedily extricate themselves with credit to the corporation and satisfaction to all concerned." The condition of the road was always uneven. Ex-Governor John Evans, who traveled this road to his ranch in Bear Creek, mentioned in a letter to his wife Margaret that the Bear Creek Wagon Road was in such poor condition that the South Park trade was going through Colorado Springs. In spite of the efforts to maintain the road, in 1880 the rights to the road were deeded to the town of Morrison, which operated the road as the Bear Creek Canyon Toll Road. Other than it being operated by the town of Morrison, there's little mention or records of the road during this period. During this time, travel from the railroad station to points west was done via one of the liveries located in Morrison. These liveries would provide daily trips into the mountains. One of the most well-known was the Abo and Lewis livery. The Colorado transcript described the business as Abo and Lewis livery, feed and sale stable, dealers in hay and grain, an old, successful, and prosperous establishment. The firm makes a specialty of furnishing outfits of all kinds for all parts of the mountain and summer resorts. Will run a daily hack line to Troutdale during the coming season. A hack line was a two-horse vehicle used for short distances. Unfortunately, by 1886, the road had deteriorated to the point that A.F. Post, who ran the general store in Evergreen, and others petitioned the Jefferson County Commissioners to take possession and open the Bear Creek Toll Road as provided by law. George Morrison, as a representative of the Toll Road Company, agreed to allow the Board of Commissioners to take possession of the road. The county operated the road, newly named the Bear Creek Toll Road, as a toll road, the only toll road operated by the county at that time. The road was never much of a moneymaker. Any money collected in tolls was spent on maintenance. The road was such a burden that in May 1889, the Jefferson County Commissioners agreed to sell the road at public auction at the courthouse in Golden to the highest bidder in order to reimburse the county for its expenses. The auction was held. No bidders showed up. During this time, a county toll collector at the toll house would record the tolls collected and expenses paid in a ledger. Although the toll rates varied somewhat, the ledger book covering the period of time from December 27, 1886 to January 1889 shows these typical rates, along with the names of the travelers and the date. The ledger is stored at the Jefferson County Archives in Golden. Familiar names on the ledger include Evans, Hicks, and Dedesi. Although Jefferson County discontinued collecting tolls most likely after a flood in the 1890s, the toll house continued to be used as a family dwelling. Clara Linda was born in the toll house in 1894. Here is Clara reminiscing about her years at the toll house near Buttonhole Rock.
I was born in the toll house on Bear Creek. I would say 2.5 miles from Morrison up there. Have you ever took particular notice that bunch of mountainous kind of rocks of the buttonhole formation in the rock. It looks just so much like a buttonhole. We always call it the buttonhole. The way the rocks come together, kind of round, you know. And that's what it got nicknamed. Toll roads were gone by that time. So they lived in the toll house.
But your mother and your dad?
It wasn't collecting toll anymore, but it was the old
was the old toll house. Are the foundations there still, do you know?
No.
They'd be long gone.
Gosh, they'd be souvenirs if nothing else. You see, that house went with the flood. Oh, we had, that I remember of, we had 3 monsters come down Bear Creek.
Clara's family name was Linda. We see her here as Amick after she married a gent named Amick. In 1891, the Idaho Spring News wrote that the county commissioners of Jefferson County will have a new wagon road built up Bear Creek Canyon, and it will be above the reach of high water. The old one was washed out. Unfortunately, it was not to last. Flooding continued to plague the canyon. In 1895, there was a bad flood, and then another one the following year, with a loss of 21 people, multiple homes, and other property. In 1899, the Colorado legislature allocated money for repairs along the Highline grade to avoid washouts. The effect of the latest flood was so devastating that there was consideration of abandoning the road altogether, as reported in the Colorado transcript. The road was badly wrecked in numerous places in the canyon, and the heaviest walls floated away like cork stoppers. Our county commissioners have a heavy, thankless task before them, and as usual, the county has a big bill of thousands of dollars to expend for a dozen or two mountain residents. Our advice is to abandon the lower end of Bear Creek Canyon and seek another outlet to Upper Bear Creek. From 1900 to 1910, there are multiple reports of the county and state spending money on the road to improve the grade of the road. Floods continued with regular frequency over the years. This article from Historically Jeffco outlines the many floods during the 20th century. Bear Creek flooded over 20 times that century, often with tragic consequences. Morrison resident Betty Swanson Rees was a telephone operator for the Morrison Phone Company when she worked to warn people up and down the canyon of flooding. Here she is describing what happened during the 1934 flood.
Morrison was prone to having high water. Sometimes the town marshal would go down into the little Morrison Park and warn the people to leave there, and people who were picnicking in bright sunshine couldn't realize that there would indeed be high waters because they were in such a natural sunshiny environment that the high water would be coming from above. So we don't know how many people were lost who would not heed the warning of the marshal. And I do remember working at the telephone office when I was only 15. That's when I was trying, when there were high waters. The way you learn about the high waters was that the farmers and or any other residents that lived in the mountains or along the creek would always call the telephone operator to tell her what was happening. Then it was the telephone operator's duty to warn everybody along the line. So on this particular night when I had the warning that there was high water coming down Mount Vernon, I was very, very busy warning everybody who lived along Mount Vernon and also those living along Bear Creek.
In spite of the warnings she herself had given, Betty watched the 1934 flood from her family's home at the Cliff House.
When the flood started, we had had a warning of high water, and foolish as we were, we went up to the upstairs rooms of the Cliff House to watch the water come down the creek. It was coming down Mount Vernon. We had no idea that it bore such terrible destruction. We watched the water come down Mount Vernon. There was a period of time in which the water was carried within the banks, and then all of a sudden down Mount Vernon, and the creek could no longer hold this mass of water. When the creek made the curve, which is right by the cliff house, it went totally out of control, and the water shot right through the grounds of the cliff house. When the high waters hit this, Bear Creek, of course, was a swollen creek. So naturally, when Mount Vernon emptied or tried to empty into Bear Creek, there was a backup of the water as well. It was indeed a frightening experience.
Betty was the granddaughter of the owner of the Cliff Hotel, John Swanson, and daughter of Helen Swanson Maxwell. She lived at the hotel with her mother Helen until 1935, working several jobs as a telephone operator and waitress. Despite all of the issues, by 1914 the Bear Creek Road was a well-used highway when Denver established the mountain park system. In 1917, just outside of Morrison, a pair of stone columns were constructed to mark Bear Creek Canyon as the southern entrance to the Denver mountain parks. In the late 1920s and 30s, the road became a popular destination for people to enjoy an outing in the mountains. With improving roads and increasing cars, by 1923, the State Highway Department called Bear Creek Road the most heavily traveled road in the state. The same year, the road was designated Colorado Highway 74. It was a popular destination as dance halls and speakeasies proliferated during Prohibition. Jefferson County was a scandalous place during those years, and illegal stills proliferated along Bear Creek. Drivers would make the run down to Denver with illegal booze, while others would drive up the winding canyon to find it. The Rocky Mountain News even proposed that citizens of Jefferson County be prohibited from entering Denver. But Bear Creek was also the home of one of the significant Civilian Conservation Corps sites during the Depression. The CCC workers changed Bear Creek Road into a well-built road with stunning efforts like this 40-foot dry-stacked wall along the creek near Kerr Gulch, as well as building the Red Rock Amphitheater and various picnic sites. The 1874 vision of George Morrison and that group of local businessmen to build a road up Bear Creek has been realized. Operated by individuals, the county, and then the state, that route is today's Colorado Highway 74. The road has proved a critical link to the growth of Morrison and Evergreen. Though local folklore credits John Evans for having built the road, Evans didn't have any active participation in the establishment, financing, or management of the road. The one name that has been consistently associated with the first 15 years of the road's existence from its inception was George Morrison. Morrison had the vision and determination to establish a road critical to the towns of Morrison and Evergreen. Next time you're driving down the canyon, consider that 150 years of history.